In this video, I'm going to show you how to mix pop rock vocals so that they sound super crisp, well defined, and just really clear with lots of depth. Take a listen to this. Okay, so as you can hear, this is quite an upbeat pop rock song. We need the vocals to sound really crisp. We need them to cut through the mix, especially when the chorus hits, because it's quite dense and there's quite a lot going on. So let's start off and take a listen to what the vocals sound like. Completely raw, absolutely no EQ, no compression, no effects, nothing at all. The rest of the track is pretty much there in terms of the mix. We might go back and make some other adjustments when we start tweaking the vocals, but ultimately, as this mix stands right now, the vocals are kind of like the last piece of the puzzle, if you like. Your world don't get old, knowing life could have ended up someplace good, someplace new. Someplace new. We know the way. So straight away on listening to that, the vocals need to be brighter. At the moment, they're just way too dark. And we're also going to need to compress. The dynamics are all over the place. Sometimes the vocal is sticking out and it's a bit too pokey. Sometimes it's disappearing into the mix. So those are the main two things that we need to address and we need to fix in this vocal. So let's open the lead vocal and start making some tweaks. So the first thing we're going to do is EQ. I'm going to add a bit of brightness. We're going to get rid of some of that sort of low mid mud that's building up. And then we're going to go into a compressor. Now, my philosophy, particularly when it comes to treating vocals, is that I'm going to EQ into the compressor. There is no right or wrong about this, and you should just do whatever works for you. I'm just giving you my experience and my thoughts on this. When you EQ after you compress, you can tend to run into sibilance issues, and you end up having to potentially put a lot of DSs in there, which can be a bit of a nightmare and end up sounding a little bit unnatural. Whereas if you EQ into the compressor, then the compressor does some of that DSing for you and it ends up sounding more natural, in my experience. So that's the first thing that we're doing. So we're adding some brightness. We've got some 10K, about 4-5 dB. Adding a touch more mids, so some shine around 5K, a little bit of mids around sort of 2K as well. I'm adding a good chunk of lows around 100, just for some extra size and weight down there. And then we're just filtering off some of those sub lows up to about 70-80 hertz on the high pass. We're then going into this EQ. I love this EQ from Slate because it's just a top and a bottom. It's just a high shelf and a low shelf, and it just sounds really, really good. And then I've got a gate on just after those EQs. I don't always use a gate on vocals, but there was a little bit of noise. I think the singer was maybe like tapping his foot in between the takes, and there was just sort of like some lip smacks and stuff that I wanted to get rid of, and the easiest way to do that was to just throw this gate on it. Let's take a listen now to what this sounds like with that processing on.
Let's set the tone, put down our phones, take a grasp of this world that we know, and make this dream reality.
Turn all that off just for a comparison.
Let's make our mark, it's just the start, you and I gonna take on the world.
Back on.
And be sure we end up someplace good, someplace new.
Now, right away, we can hear how much crisper and cleaner that vocal sounds. The low mid mud has gone, and strangely enough, we're not actually doing any subtractive EQ. It is all additive. We're adding, you know, the high shelf. We're also adding some of those mids and even some lows, but straight away, it just sounds really crisp, really clean. We're now going to deal with the dynamics. Now, I'm a massive fan of 1176s on vocals. I've got a bunch of them in the rack at the side of me. Sometimes I'll record through these. I also think the UAD and the Slate plugins are really, really great. And on this vocal, I've got the UAD Blue Stripe 1176, and then I'm also going into an LA2A just after it. The Blue Stripe is amazing. It's really aggressive. Sometimes I'll just leave it at that, but then the LA2A can really kind of smooth out some of the aggressiveness from the 76. It's a classic combination, and I just felt it worked really, really well on this vocal, on this song. So let's put those in and let's have a look. You can see how hard we're hitting each of these compressors as well.
Let's make our mark, 'cause it's just the start. You and I gonna take on the world.
So straight away we can hear how much better that is now sitting in the mix. It's pinned in place. We're not getting the bits where it's jumping out in front of everything and then disappearing. Let's take a listen in the chorus, because that's where we really notice the dynamics causing a problem in this vocal.
Please guide me through the wind and rain. 'Cause in truth we will find our way to follow our dreams.
That's sounding great. The vocal is really kind of sitting exactly where we want it now. The final thing I'm then doing on this vocal is just a tiny little bit of de-essing. Not a lot, we don't need to because we're EQ'd into the compressor, but because of that 10k boost that we put on earlier, there's just a couple of S's that I just want to tame a little bit. And then this plugin here, this just adds a little bit extra sparkle, a bit extra brightness. It mimics the Dolby A series, which is really, really cool. It's a really good plugin from Slate. If you just want a little bit of sparkle, a bit of brightness, it's really, really cool. So let's put that on. Let's take a listen. That lead vocal is sitting perfectly now, exactly where we want it. Now, we also have a double vocal here, and you notice that this is just doubling the lead in the choruses just because we want it to sound really big and really wide. So this is actually two doubles, a left and a right. Let's take a listen to what this is actually doing.
'Cause in truth we will find our way to follow our dreams.
So because that is a double of the lead, I'm going to process it pretty much identically. So the first thing that we're starting with are those two same EQs, and then we're also compressing exactly the same. So we're going into a Blue Stripe 1176 and then into an LA2A. So let's now put that with the lead vocal.
Please guide me through the wind and rain.
I'm just going to take the harmonies out so we can just focus on the lead.
'Cause in truth we will find our way to follow our dreams.
I take that double out just so you can hear what it's adding. So this is just the main lead on its own.
So please believe when I say
Double back in.
it will be okay. It will be okay.
So you can see that that double's just adding some extra width and just some extra size in the chorus, because that single lead is just getting a little bit buried and it's just sounding a little bit thin on its own. It's fine in the verses, but that double's just adding some extra depth in the choruses. So now we've kind of dealt with the leads. Now we're onto the harmonies. So there's two harmonies on this. There's a low one and a high one, and both of them are double tracked as well, left and right. So let's take a listen. I'm going to solo the vocals just for now so you can hear what those harmonies are doing. We've got the leads in with the processing we just talked through, and the harmonies at the moment are just completely raw.
'Cause in truth we will find our way to follow our dreams.
So those harmonies sound great. They're recorded really well, but they are way too dark. If these are going to cut and they're going to add something to this mix, they're going to lift the vocal in the chorus, which is where they come in the most part, then they need to be a lot brighter, and we're going to need to compress them heavily to pin them where we want them in the mix, and that's going to give us flexibility for where we place them. We want them to be behind the lead vocal, supporting it. We don't want them to be too up front, because the harmonies, they're not the lead vocal, they're playing a supporting role here. So let's start with that low harmony, and as you can see, we're adding some more 10k, we're adding some more mids, and we're also adding a chunk of lows. Nothing groundbreaking here in terms of the processing. We're then going into an LA2A. The reason that I'm not using the 76 for this is because the 76 is too aggressive. That's going to put the vocal right there, right in your face. I don't want the harmonies right in your face. I want to push them back behind the lead. So the LA2A does an amazing job of this because it's a slower attack, slower release. It just really pins them where we want them to be. The final thing after that is just a de-esser, because all of that heavy compression, the 10k boost, it is just bringing the S's out just a little bit too much. And again, because these are backing vocals, I don't want the S's to clash with the S's in the lead. So we are de-essing this a fair bit. It's then a similar story with the high harmonies. So the high harmonies, we're doing very similar EQ boosts. Exactly the same story with compression. We've got an LA2A pinning back around -7, -10 dB. And then we're finishing with the de-esser, just making sure that the S's are not poking out, not clashing with the lead too much. So now all of that's in, let's take a listen. We'll start in solo, and then I'll put the rest of the track in so you can hear what's going on.
Do we even know the way? Please guide me through the wind and rain. 'Cause in truth we will find our way to follow our dreams.
Now with the whole track in. So all in all, those vocals are sounding so much better. They're brighter, they're cutting through the mix, but they're also pinned exactly where they need to be. All that's left is to give them some extra space and depth, because at the moment, they're still a little bit two-dimensional. And that's going to come from the FX, the sends that we're sending these vocals to. Now for vocals, I'm typically doing a combination of reverbs and delays. And these are the main delays that I've got the vocal set to. The first one is just a tape slap, 166 millisecond mono tape slap. The second is an 1/8 note delay, just a standard digital delay on an 1/8 note. And then there's also a throw delay. I'm not actually sure I'm using this anywhere in this particular song, but I'll always send the lead to a throw that's set to either a full note or maybe a quarter note. And that's just for those vocal throws, if you want to just fill some space. This song didn't need it, but it's there if you ever do. Then in terms of reverb, my main vocal reverb is this plate. It's a 480 Lexicon plate. Nice long delay, 2 seconds, but then the pre-delay, we're pushing it way back, 150 milliseconds. I've spoke about this in previous videos. If you have a really short pre-delay, then you tend to get reverb that clouds the vocal, whereas if you set this pre-delay, I've got mine set to around 150 milliseconds. There's 150 milliseconds before the reverb comes in, and what that means is you can push the reverb a little bit more. You can get really lush plates and halls, but without it getting in the way of the actual vocal. And it's just a really cool trick. Definitely experiment with longer pre-delays, not just for things like vocals. It can work great for guitars, for other instruments as well that you're using reverb on. Now, a couple of other things that's worth mentioning are these group tracks or buses or aux, whatever you want to call them. The first one is this one that I've just called vocals, and this is just for the double. So that's this stereo double of the lead, both of the harmonies, the low, the high, and then there's also some BV, some like gang backing vocals here that come in the middle 8. All of those are going to this vocal bus, and all I've got on here is just Soundtoys Microshift. I really like this setting here, the stereo BGV thickener. What I feel that does is it gives the backing vocals, the harmonies, some extra width. It kind of pushes them out wider than the speakers, which I've just really like the sound of.
So please believe when I say it will be okay. It will be okay.
So with that on, it's just adding some really nice width to those backing vocals. Now the other thing I've got is this Dolby bus, exactly the same tracks going to it, and this is just the Dolby A360s. I actually have a pair of them in the rack at the side of me, but Slate Digital do this really cool plugin as well. And right now on this tutorial, I've just got the Slate plugin adding some brightness. Let's take a listen to what this is doing.
So please believe when I say it will be okay.
Let's turn that off.
So please believe when I say
Back on.
it will be okay.
That's really not a subtle difference at all, but the Dolbys they just add a sheen and a sort of glass-like top end to the vocals. On their own, sounds quite thin, sounds quite harsh, but no one's going to hear these backing vocals on their own. It's how it sounds in the mix that counts. So let's put all of that in. We've got those delays, the reverbs, and we're also going through these auxiliary tracks as well.
And make this dream reality. Let's make our mark, it's just the start. You and I gonna take on the world and be sure we end up someplace good, someplace new. Do we even know the way? Please guide me through the windy way.
Let's just remind ourselves where we started with these vocals. So take everything off. And now back on. Now, if you're a musician or an artist or you're in a band, likely one of your biggest frustrations is getting your music heard. When it comes to release, how do you maximize your chances of getting it heard by thousands, if not millions of people? Getting it played on the radio, those big Spotify playlists, seeing your follower count go up on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and getting a ton of new fans that are absolutely loving the music that you're putting out. How exactly do you do that? Well, ultimately, this comes down to your release strategy. And for many musicians, this can be a real kind of sticking point, just not knowing what to do, where to start. Maybe you've had songs that you've released in the past that you've been really proud and excited about, only to feel really deflated on release day and for the week afterwards when it's just not getting traction and people are just not really taking any notice. Well, if this is you, if you've ever been in this situation, I've got something that will 100% help. This is a 28-day release roadmap. This is the exact roadmap that I've used with all of the artists that I've worked with that have gone on to get thousands of followers on social media, getting played on huge radio stations all over the world, building up a solid fan base that allows them to go on tour, play festivals, and just do all of the things that any musician wants to do. And best of all, it's completely free. You can even customize it to your own taste if that's what you want to do. So check out the link in the description below, go and get your release roadmap now, and start getting people to take notice of your music.